Welcome to DIY Guitar Making and Eric Schaefer Guitars. In this episode, I'm going to show you what to do when things go wrong and you get a split in your top. So a friend of mine and a student from one of the 2017 workshops visited the other day, Robert Livingston from LC Guitars, and I was showing him a top that I was working on, this top right here, and I reached up onto the shelf to pull it down, and like a dumbass, I dropped the top from about shoulder height, and this being Western red cedar, it's a lot more brittle than other woods. Even Sitka spruce, I think, would have been just fine falling from that height, but Western red cedar you got to be a little more careful with, or really any cedar, just because of that brittle nature. Not that you can't crack a Sitka top too, but these are just things to think about when you're selecting woods. But anyway, this is where we're at now. I have the crack, I have to deal with it. Now, as devastating as this might seem, this actually is a very easy repair, so I wasn't too concerned about it. So this split, by the way, runs from the very top here all the way down and through to the sound hole, literally separating the two halves of the upper bout here. I could take these two pieces and flare them side to side if I wanted to, and you could see that separation, but I'm actually not going to do that. I'm not going to really show you that crack in that way, even though I could, because that's really the first rule or thing to keep in mind when you're dealing with a repair like this, and that's not to mess with it. Don't start pulling the crack apart and looking at it and showing your friends and things like that, because you're going to damage those two perfect pieces. Right now, the two sides of the crack are like two perfectly fitting puzzle pieces, as long as I don't go in there with a tool and start scraping around or start spreading it open and looking at the crack and things like that. So just don't mess with it. Keep it as it is right now. If you do that, it's actually a very easy repair. Now, another thing that happened when this fell is this little chunk right here. You can see that. A piece popped out. That's this piece right here. I kept it. That's another thing to keep in mind when this happens. It's very helpful to find any little tiny pieces that may have separated completely and keep those. Maybe put them in a little Ziploc bag if you plan on doing the repair later. Either way, that's something you definitely want to keep, because this is another one of our puzzle pieces that's going to fit just perfectly and seamlessly into that spot. If we lost this piece, we would have to recreate, or at least if we wanted the best aesthetic solution, we would have to recreate this piece to fit as precisely as we can in this very non-uniform shaped slot here, which is definitely a more involved task, so I'm happy to have this piece right now. Alright, so let's get started with it. First, I very carefully reassemble that missing piece. I can use other objects like this hard wooden dowel to wedge it further into place, and a hard flat block helps wedge it in deeper from above. But really, you can use a variety of objects to help manipulate that piece into position. Often something like a paperclip works really well to precisely press in a finicky end. Now, holding the two sides of the split together with just finger pressure against a hard, flat surface, I am going to simply run a bead of water-thin CA glue, also known as super glue, along the split. This glue is so thin that it will wick into every part of the joint. In fact, that's why I have laid wax paper down on the other side to keep from gluing my top to my workbench. Now, while I'm still maintaining finger pressure on the joint, I spray accelerator to instantly cure the glue. And then I still hold on for just a couple seconds, just for good measure, before letting go. And voila, the joint is complete. So I got really lucky here actually, because if this split were anywhere else, I would consider using some cleat material, which is just any wood with the grain running perpendicular like it is here. See how the grain's running across, and that way if I were to glue this down in this area, it would work like a layer of plywood and it would stitch up that area with the alternating grain, right? So the prevailing grain direction of the top is going up like this, and if I were to use this cleat material here, I'll break it down to a usable size, a size about this big, then this would stitch up that seam there. Now in this case, not only do I have several braces fairly close together here, including the block, which is going to go about right there. So there aren't really large open spaces to worry about anyway, except if it wasn't for the next thing I'm going to show you right now, I would consider putting a little cleat maybe right in there, just so that doesn't potentially open up. However, this whole thing will be reinforced and essentially you could say cleated from the top, because it just so happens that my fretboard covers right over that area all the way down to the end. So it's completely unnecessary to add this reinforcement on the bottom. It's going to have this glued to the other side. And then of course, as I just showed, it has these nice stout braces and the block providing a good counter pressure to that fretboard top. So it's a very heavily reinforced area. Really don't have to worry about stitching that up with a cleat. But let's just pretend that we had the split somewhere down here. It's actually very common to get it, say, over here when you're carving the braces and things like that, and you have it on your workbench, and you just lean a little too hard on it or something like that, and you get this split down here on the side. So you would do everything that I just did now with the super glue, but then it's a good idea to also cleat that. So you just glue a cleat in like this, again with the alternating grain, and you're just filling in the space between braces. So as you can see here, there would be a brace right here, and the X brace would be right here. So you would just put in a cleat, I would say about the size that you see here. What I don't like to do is, you might think it's most prudent to run the cleat all the way up so it touches the brace here, and then down so it touches the brace on the opposite end. However, it's just unnecessary. You can leave a little bit of space where that crack is uncleated between the cleat and the brace, and that's perfectly fine. It's not going to open up in that area. It's too short of a length for it to open up. It's still perfectly reinforced by this. And if you were to run the cleat from brace to brace like I just showed, it creates just way too much coupling of those braces. Whenever you have braces or cleats or anything like that contact each other, it would basically couple this brace to this one and create a significant amount of stiffness in this area. Whereas as long as you leave this cleat uncoupled from the braces, that is not touching the braces, it's not going to significantly stiffen up the area. It's only going to add a pretty trivial amount of stiffness. But it's interesting because the difference between this just being a 1/16 of an inch away from that brace and it touching the brace is enormous though. It would stiffen that up in a very dramatic way if they were touching. But as long as you pull it back just a little bit from the brace, you don't get that effect. So just something to consider if you're using cleats. Don't butt them right up against the braces. So if you found this video after you had some catastrophe where you cracked your top like I did, hopefully this is calming your nerves a little bit and you can see how it's really not that big of a deal to repair something like this. So good luck and get back to it, and I will see you guys later. If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video every Friday. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.